Anytime that you want to speak from a platform and share what the Lord has shared with you, the significance and the importance of that is not lost on me at all. And I never want to screw that up. So I really don't know what the Lord has or had for me to speak. I was texting back and forth with Jessica because I was like, I'm not getting anything. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. But it's called My Story. And so this morning, not that I'm procrastinating, I just sat down and started typing what I felt like he was bringing to my brain in that moment. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm trying to really slow it down by... I might be done in 3 minutes. And then we're all going to go get ice cream, right? Right? That's right. Amen, right? I wrote here, my trouble is thinking I need to have something significantly profound to say from up here. Something that will make a big impact. But here's the thing, the Lord works in big ways and he works in small ways, and it's not up to me as which way he wants to use me tonight. So I'm just going to trust in him and do what needs to be done. So I grew up not too far from here. I went to Rustburg High School, and I shared a room with my brother in a single wide trailer. I'm going to read a lot, so I'm trying to look at y'all, but I forget what I wrote down. So, and the Lord's not giving it to me in the moment. But I grew up pretty much on the side of 29, going towards Alta Vista, went to Rustburg High School. I shared a room with my brother in a single wide trailer until we got too old to share a room. And then we did a swap with my grandma, who lived in a house that her husband built back hundreds of years ago. I say hundreds, he was pretty old. He died well before I came along. He was very old when my dad was born. So we moved into that house. And just to explain, not that I'm saying one thing or another, but that house was the second floor. Actually, my bedroom was held up by a 4x4 that we had to put in and joist up to the ceiling and use a jack to jack it back up because it was sagging so badly. There was no air conditioning. There was one bathroom. So, yeah, I think my kids understand that now because our current home has one bathroom. And one bathroom with, adults and teenagers is never a good situation. But we moved into her house, and she moved into our trailer. My dad's family all lived pretty much on that hillside. It was family property. And each of the kids, my dad was a twin. He had a set of twin sisters and then a younger sister. So they all got like 5 acres parceled out to them. And so that's what we lived on. We got the 5 acres that the house was on, that my grandma lived in at that point. So it was family property. So my childhood was really simple. We didn't have much, but we really didn't know that until, of course, about high school, because we didn't really need much. My mom, I'm going to tell you, could stretch out some SpaghettiOs and Kool-Aid and make that last for like 3 weeks or something for us kids. I'm not really sure how she did that because that doesn't happen in my house. But I tell people all the time she would buy like 1 20-piece chicken McNuggets and feed 6 of us that was running around because our house was the house where everyone dropped their kids off at. We went to a Methodist church, and because pretty much that's what was expected. My grandmother's church was Methodist. That was their family church. So we went there on Sunday mornings, all minus my dad. My dad didn't attend church with us. So my mom would pack my brother and I up and take us to church. And we sat there in our Sunday best and tried not to fall asleep. And then would go home and the box was checked. My brother and I were part of the youth group, and we had fun doing all the things that kids do in youth group. I do remember wondering at some point, and I want to say this was probably late middle school, maybe early high school, but probably middle school age. I always wondered what made my religion the right religion. And no one could really answer that for me. Not that I had the guts to ask very many people. I never really voiced it to anyone other than a few people around my age, and they were just like, whatever, let's go have fun and, play. So in high school, I started to attend Crossroad Baptist Church with one of my high school friends. At one of their services, the Liberty University Gospel Choir came and sang. And it was pretty awesome. I'll never forget the song. It's Jesus, You Are Excellent. And it was an excellent song. I'm not going to joke. And it was amazing. And it was so amazing that I was completely moved. I do honestly believe that it was the Holy Spirit moving. And so I went down to the front and I gave my life to Jesus. That was probably, I will say maybe sophomore, junior year, something like that. So I started to attend that church regularly with the Reverend Gary Coleman, I believe his name was. I also went and joined a fellowship of Christian athletes at school and did all those fun things. I had a lot of Christian friends. And for a while there, I was doing pretty good. So in high school, how everybody asks you, what are you going to do next? Everybody was asking, what are you going to do after you graduate? I'm sure Zen's getting tired of that, right? Probably Levy too, because you really don't have a clue as to what you really want to do. You have a lot of clue as to what everybody else thinks that you should do. I didn't have the best grades. That was my brother. And I knew I wouldn't be able to get any scholarships to any colleges. And remember, I was living in a house where the second floor was falling down on top of us. So it was a big concern of mine to not incur those costs to what I thought would be to my parents, but it would have been mine. So I really did not have a true feeling or calling like I should go to college. Like I said, in high school, I could have gotten better grades. I just didn't feel like I wanted to. Let's see here. I still did what I was expected to do and looked at colleges. Funny enough, I was looking at a women's college down in South Carolina. I don't know why, but it had a cool name, and I think that's what it was for. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with my life. And then one day my best friend was talking to me, and he was telling me how he was going to take the ASVAB at the high school. And I was like, what is the ASVAB? And he's like, oh, it's a test you take for the military. And I was like, well, when are you taking the ASVAB? Still was not interested, it was just conversation. And he was like, oh, it's during English class. And I was like, ooh, how do you sign up for that? Because I don't want to go to English class. Like, I would much prefer to take a test that I couldn't care about passing just to get out of English class. So I signed up to get out of English class, and I went and took the ASVAB. I don't want to say I put forth a whole lot of effort. I didn't try to fail it, but I wasn't trying real hard either. The gears and mechanics portion really tripped me up. So I went and took the ASVAB test. And your score will determine what jobs you are offered, or they tell you that you're qualified to do. So long story short, took the test, scored a decent score, and the recruiter started calling. And the rest, they say, is history. I will say the military is probably one of the better things that happened to me. So that was junior year. So, yeah, that was junior year. Technically, the recruiters couldn't start calling us and talking to us unless we initiated that contact prior to the summer before your senior year. So after I took the ASVAB, the recruiters called. They came out to the house. They were telling us their spiel, and it all sounded really cool. And so I ended up doing what they call depping in, and that's a delayed entry program. So that they say you're half in and half out. So I went down to MEPS in Richmond. That's where they show you all the really cool videos of each job that you're qualified for, because you got to make a decision on what you want to be when you grow up. And I was like, ooh, a military police, that looks really cool, because the guy was standing there, like, directing traffic. And I was like, I can do that, right? So I joined the military police corps. Pretty much, that made high school really easy for me, because I already knew what I was going to do then. So all those questions of what are you going to do, I had an answer for it then. And it really took a lot of pressure off for me. I graduated in June. I spent a couple of weeks down in Mexico on a school trip with my grandma, and that's a completely other story for another time. And yes, with my grandma, and that was a blast. And then in July, I was at Fort McClellan, Alabama, and that was mid-July. And that was as hot as you can imagine that it is. Yes. And they had these really cool hills called Big Bane and Baby Bane that they like to do what in the military they call an integrity check. And an integrity check is after you've done a run until you want to throw up and quit, they're just going to turn around and head for the biggest hill that's on that base. And that's your integrity check. I did well in basic training, graduated, and off to Korea. That was my first duty station. It was a great first duty station, filled with hard work, a lot of fun times, way too much alcohol, and the best people and the most terrible decisions that I could make. Way too much alcohol. But that's military culture. Most of you guys probably know that. So I was indoctrinated into the military culture. From Korea, I went to Fort Ritchie, Maryland, where I met one of the best people I've ever known in my life. And he's sitting in the back row there. Matt and I dated for only about 5 months or so before we got married. Yeah, gasp. You know what's funny? It didn't even faze me or even cross my mind that was really soon. You know, I think that's because we connected on a different level, you know. And what's even more funny is when people asked me about when Fox and Haley got married, they're like, isn't that really soon? And I just chuckled. Not really. They've been dating for like a year and a half. But anyway, so Matt and I dated for about 5 months or so, and then we got married. And in the military, 5 months is a lifetime. 5 months is enough time to go and come and go again and come back again and then go for good, you know. So that probably had a little influence into how quickly that happened. No, I was not pregnant. Fox did come along, though, eventually. It took a couple years. We wanted to enjoy ourselves a little bit before we decided to have kids. And it wasn't even a conscious decision. It was just like, oh, there we go. I remember I called my mom. Seriously, this is funny. I called my mom because I was so excited. We had been married for about 2 years, 2.5 years or so. And I found out I was pregnant, and it was a surprise. You know, we weren't actively trying, but we weren't actively preventing either. And so found out I was pregnant. It was the middle of the stinking night, and I was so excited. I called my mom, 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke her up, and I was like, hey, Grandma. And she goes, what? And I'm like, you're going to be a grandma. And she's like, okay, and hangs the phone up. And I'm like, that was not what I was expecting to hear, you know. And she told me later she couldn't go back to sleep, but she never called me back, you know. So anyway, Fox came along, and after that, we were off to Germany for a short stay. I'm not going to get into the details of that. We were only in Germany for a short period of time just due to medical issues with Fox. So they decided that Germany wasn't good enough for us, so they brought us back to Fort Lewis, Washington, where we stayed for 3 years. Our time at Fort Lewis was very challenging for us. Yeah. We had Fox as a small child and toddler. I think when we got back, he was a little over a year or so, and grew into a toddler, of course. Matt and I were both military police, so our schedules were just all over the place. If you're working the road, which is your law enforcement duties, you're working shift work. If you're not in the road and you're on your green cycle, which is your field cycle, you could be gone for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. Just depends on where they want to send you and what they want to do with you. And then if you're on your yellow cycle, it's a generally normal schedule, but it's always rotating, and there's always different things going on. So we had Fox. We were both MPs. While we were at Fort Lewis, I deployed twice while we were there. Matt deployed once. And all of that coupled with field time and Yakima short duty assignments. Yakima was probably 3 hours, I think, across the mountains in the straight up desert that I found out I was severely allergic to. I had never been more miserable in my life. I couldn't breathe for about 3 weeks. I don't know how I survived. So with all of that said and done, we were hardly together as a family unit at all for those 3 years, and that's why it was really difficult. And we sat down and we figured out one time, of the 3 years we were stationed there, we were actually together for 8 months. But that's all right. I tell people all the time, like, Matt and I work together. You know, we ride to work together. We see each other at work. We eat lunch together every stinking day. We ride back home together. If I go to the grocery store, he rides with me. We ride together to church. And I think that the military really made me appreciate time with him in a different way than a lot of married couples do. You know, it's just like, I understand that is valuable time. Even if it's me sleeping in the passenger seat while we're going to work and he's driving every day. I get my naps in. I mean, to me, that's very special time, you know. Okay, so from Fort Lewis, while we were at Fort Lewis, there was a lot going on while we were at Fort Lewis that's really influential, and I'm not just sharing this just to share all of it. A lot of it has, you can see some movement coming up here. So at Fort Lewis, I was sent to JRTC, which is at Fort Polk, Louisiana, because Alabama wasn't hot enough. While I was there, they decided to send me to Louisiana in August and September. And that is a different kind of heat. That's like liquid heat. Yeah. This is when 9/11 happened. So we were deployed to JRTC in preparation to go to Kosovo. So they like to send you away for a long period of time before they bring you back for a little bit and then really send you away for a long period of time. 9/11 had a pretty significant impact on me being in the military. And I think mostly because when that happened, you know, after the first plane crashed into the World Trade Center, we immediately got notified and the bases went on full alert. We were still playing war games, but there was this other war game going on in the background. And so the Sergeant Major sent me over to, for some reason, someone brought a TV with us down there. So I ran over and got their TV, and we brought it back, and our signal folks rigged it up with a satellite so that we could pick up the news channels. And I watched the second plane hit the tower, and then I watched the towers collapse, and then you get the notifications of the Pentagon being hit. And it was just pure chaos, and we're still playing war games, because what else is there to do? But it was really significant, and it had a really big impact on me. Just a side story, we went and visited the 9/11 memorial in western Pennsylvania where the plane crashed into the field. And Levy was just like, I don't think she understood why I was so emotional, but I almost couldn't control the emotions rolling through me. Very well done, by the way. But it was just, I mean, you guys know what it was. I'm sure most of you, not all of you, watched the same stuff I did. So we were on orders to deploy to Kosovo when we were at JRTC in preparation training. And at that point, I was wondering, are we going to be redirected? Because our stuff's already packed. It's very easy to go ahead and send us to a different location. But thankfully, that didn't happen. And our orders held firm, and we went to Kosovo that October until May of the following year. Kosovo was hard. Mostly because that was my first time, not my first time being away from my family, but my first time from being away from my family for a significant period of time. 3 weeks, a month, we've done that many times. but a 6-month deployment in a different country was a little bit different. Let's see here. Kosovo worked. Kosovo was interesting. It was a beautiful country. It was lots of different cultures. I learned a lot being around the different people there. It was a place where a civilian would walk into your MP station holding an unexploded ordnance and asking you to please dispose of it. Yeah, I mean, and that was just normal days for them. Was not normal days for me, you know, and it's just like, let's take that back outside, please. But it was a fun time. It was a gorgeous country, and we were only in a really small part of it. So we went to Kosovo, and then I came home, and then you have to work to make your family a family unit again. Because when someone leaves for that amount of time, the family kind of adjusts around that absence. And it's hard when everybody comes back together because you got to let go of things that you're used to being in control of and vice versa. And Fox was really spoiled at that point. I mean, like really spoiled. Let's see here. Not long after my unit returned from Kosovo, we received orders to deploy to Iraq. In between that, Matt went to Fort Leonard Wood, I think, to ANOC for 3 months. So I'm gone for 6 months. I come back. I think I was back a few months. He went to ANOC for 3 months. He came back, and it's like a month and a half later. It was like, surprise. You know, and this was before the war started. We found out in February we were leaving sometime. Didn't know when, just be prepared to. At the same time, because of 9/11, Matt was getting ready to head to the Pentagon on a deployment. And that was, I think, 6-month rotation that it was scheduled. A 1-year rotation, supposed to have been. So I knew he was getting ready to leave. I fully was not expecting to go again. And then we come up on orders of be prepared to. So in the process of 2 days, my company commander, no, I think it was your company commander and my first sergeant had to go argue with the battalion commander to let us go home on leave to take him to grandparents that he'd never seen before. So we got granted 10 days, I think it was. And so, I mean, we bought tickets on a Thursday and flew out on a Friday and flew back to the East Coast. We went and saw his parents first. Was like, hey, here's your grandparents that may come see you at some point in time in the next, 6 months, a year. We never really know when we're coming back. And then we drove down to my parents' house so that he could meet my parents. Now, they had seen him as an infant, but remember, after he was born, we went Germany, Fort Lewis, and just hadn't made it back home yet. So he had no clue who these people were, what they were to him. And he's spoiled rotten. Oh, it gets worse. Oh, it gets so much worse, right? So stayed with my parents a few days, went back up to Matt's parents' house. And then on that last day, we had to leave very early in the morning because I think we were flying out of Cincinnati and there was an ice storm coming in. That was the only time I've sat on a plane and watched them de-ice the wings, and it scared the living crap out of me. So that morning, we had to go creep into his bedroom and try and wake him up enough to explain to him that we're getting ready to leave. And unfortunately, he didn't wake up enough to really comprehend that. We found out later that he woke up and was like watching us get in the vehicle out the window and was crying out for us to come get him, which, yeah, we didn't find out to that until like years later, thank the Lord, because I don't think I could have taken that. But we had to say goodbye to him, not really knowing when we're going to get back. He was supposed to go to the Pentagon. I was supposed to go to Iraq for a year, so I'm thinking I'm not going to see him for at least a year plus, Let me find my place. It ended up being 15 months that he was back in Virginia without one of us. Iraq is really where I started to consider myself a non-believer. You remember I got saved when I was in high school. Here's a funny thing in basic training, they say every soldier is a Christian or every soldier is religious because there's nothing else you can do on Sundays except go to church. So everyone goes to church when you're in basic training. And everyone is worshiping and having fun and whatever. But going to Korea and then coming back, I never really attended church. I never had the inkling to attend church. I really didn't think about it, to be honest. And in Iraq is where I really started to say, I don't believe in that. I don't get it. I considered myself agnostic. I thought, sure, there's got to be something, but I don't believe in this stuff that I was fed as a baby. I had seen just so many different cultures and so many different religions and so many different practices and so many good things and so many horrible things that I didn't know what to believe. So I was just like, I'm just not going to, I'm just going to kind of let it ride. I don't think it was like a choice I made like in the moment saying, I'm not going to. That's just kind of how it progressed over time. That old question continued to come into my mind. Why is what I grew up believing the right thing? What if I'm wrong? What if it's this other thing over here, When I was in Iraq, though, I'll be honest with you, we were at CSC Scania, and I was standing with my first sergeant, and they were getting ready to go to Babylon. I had an opportunity to go to Babylon, didn't take it. But they were getting ready to go to Babylon. Our chaplain was leading this thing, and it was crazy because, yes, you're in the middle of a war, but we're going to Babylon because we can, because we don't have any other opportunities. Who's coming back to Iraq to do that? And I was just like, nope, don't want to go. Don't really care. I've seen enough of the sandbox. I don't care to see any more of it. But I was standing with my first sergeant, and I envy them. And he's like, what do you mean? I was just like, how awesome would it be to have that faith that you could just walk in peace and not be worried about what might happen next? And when I was in Iraq, I wrote my death letters in case of, and as soldiers, we told each other where we kept them so that they could give them to our family members if something were to happen. Let me find my place again. So those people, my friends, they had a comfort that I didn't have. I didn't know the Father. I didn't know that he was continuously chasing me. I didn't know his voice, and I didn't see his chase. I was just pretty much empty. Hold on. All right, so this is just a side note story really quick, because I'm going to show you and I'm going to tell you all the little things looking back now, how God was moving in my life, little things, just little things. So not too long after we arrived in Kuwait, because we had to go to Kuwait in preparation to move across the border into Iraq. We crossed over 2 weeks after the war started, and we were going to Talil Air Base. And I don't know if y'all know where Talil Air Base, that's where that one soldier, Jessica, whatever her name is, got captured from. She was right outside of Talil Air Base. So we were moving into Talil Air Base. And right before we were crossing the border, I knew we were getting ready to go. We had phones, like phone stations in Kuwait. So I was able to call Matt on occasion, just a few times. It's not like they were readily available, but we could make it work. So I ran in to make a phone call to him, hoping that he wasn't busy, because I know they stay pretty busy at the Pentagon, to let him know we're getting ready to move. I don't know when I'm going to be able to talk to you again. We didn't have an address, had no idea what our address would be, how we would receive mail, what anything looked like. We were crossing the border 2 weeks after the war started. So I called him, and as soon as he answered the phone, he goes, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you called. My orders to Korea didn't get deferred or didn't get deleted, and I have to fly back to Fort Lewis like in a couple days or something. and I'm to report to Korea in the next couple weeks. Now, mind you, we had packed up our whole household. All of our stuff was in storage, so he was flying back to Fort Lewis, going into a storage unit, digging through boxes and crates of stuff, looking for, anything, civilian clothes, Army uniforms, gear. He had to clear Fort Lewis, and in order to do that, you had to turn all your stuff in. All of that stuff was in storage. So he had to go dig and do that, and I was like, what do you mean you have to leave? Now, I don't have an address. I don't have a phone. He doesn't have an address. He won't have a phone. We have no idea how we're trying to communicate with each other. And I go, okay. I had seen another soldier with a satellite phone. So I said, honey, go buy 2 satellite phones. And they ain't cheap. Go buy 2 satellite phones. And we had, Sergeant Weathers was due over in Iraq in probably a couple weeks, I think, maybe a month. I don't remember exactly the time frame. I was like, go buy a satellite phone, load it up with minutes, send it over with Sergeant Weathers. When I get it, I'll try and call you. We'll try and figure this out. So go back to Talil Air Base. And mind you, we've been in Kuwait for a couple weeks. We moved up right below the border for a few days, crossed over the border, went to Talil Air Base. We had occupied this, if I call it a building, I'm being nice, because everything over there was just, third world country. You can't imagine what it looks like. And it was nasty and it was dirty, but we had this little building that we occupied and kind of took over. We put our tents out back to sleep in, but this is where our operations cell was just operating out of. And so we were hanging out, and I want to say it had been a couple weeks, and I knew Sergeant Weathers was due in at any moment in time, and I am anxiously awaiting that satellite phone because I hadn't talked to Matt in a while. I didn't know where he was stationed at in Korea. I didn't know what was going on or nothing. So Sergeant Weathers gets there. I ran out and pretty much snatched it right out of his hands. I didn't even say, hey, how's it going or anything. And he was a friend of mine. I was just like, give it to me now. And I ran back up onto the roof. And so I'm opening up this sat phone, and there's no directions. And I'm like, what the heck? It tells you kind of how to turn the phone on and it was a piece of paper that was just generic to how to operate a satellite phone. And then 2 phone numbers written at the top that was probably 15 or 20 numbers long. And I'm like, well, which one's his? He didn't even write, this is my phone number and this is your phone number. And I'm sitting there and I am just so frustrated. And I'm sitting there going, how the heck? And the phone rings. And I'm like, hello? All right? And it's Matt. And he called me at the exact moment that I had turned that sat phone on. That's God, right? Anyway, towards the end of the deployment, while we were in Kuwait, so we were in Iraq for a year, and then we go back to Kuwait, and there's a couple weeks of very intense cleaning because the United States does not want any piece of Iraq to come back with us. So customs is very, very strict. So we're washing trucks and washing trucks and washing trucks and washing trucks and washing gear and storing up everything and trying to get it all ready to come home. Matt was able to get in touch with me. I don't even remember how he was able to get in touch with me. I just remember that he called me or I called him, but it was at some point we were washing these trucks and packing up our Connexes. And he was getting ready to leave Korea. So he'd already been there for his year. Or not quite. He was coming up on the end of. And so, usually within 2 or 3 months, so you're coming up on the end of your 1-year stay in Korea, you find out where you're going next, And as a sergeant first class, I believe, you can call DA and ask them nicely to send you somewhere. And if it's available, they generally try to work with you when you're coming back from an unaccompanied tour, because Korea is an unaccompanied tour, meaning you can't take your family. So they try and be nice and work with you to get you someplace that's not so terrible. So he calls me, and he's just like, hey, the options are highly deployable places, like Fort Benning or Fort Hood or whatever they were, or it was not anywhere that we wanted to go because we were coming from a highly deployable place, or at least I was, and he was in Korea. So, or it was Fort Gordon, Georgia, but they didn't have a place for me. They had a place for him based off of rank. You know, you have all your positions and everything. So based off of rank, they had a place for him, but not a place for me. And I was like, what are we going to do? Because I don't know if we can handle another 3 years of this. So my sergeant major came by soon after that conversation, and he's like, what's up, Jay? What's going on? And I'm like, Sergeant Major, I don't know what the heck is going on. I was like, they're trying to send Matt to another deployable unit. I don't know what to do. You know, we want to go to Fort Gordon. That's an option, but they don't have a place for me. And he was just like, and he goes, And if you know him, And he goes, tell Matt to go. And I said, excuse me, Sergeant Major? And he's like, tell Matt to go. He goes, I'll take care of the rest. This is how much I trust that man. I called Matt and I said, just go to Fort Gordon. And he's like, okay. So he calls him back and he accepts the place at Fort Gordon. Pretty much I said, go, I'll get there somehow. Sergeant Major Shelley said so. So this is the man that I told him I'd give him my second-born son, but I've kind of like reneged on that because I wasn't planning on having a second son. But he was always good to us. He really knew how to take care of soldiers. So it took about a month or so after we returned to Fort Lewis for Sergeant Major Shelley to come through, because you have to be back boots on ground for at least, I believe, a month before they'll even consider putting you on orders to go somewhere, because you just got back. Not even realizing that my family was across the United States. I had orders to report to Fort Gordon by that summer. We came back that spring, and by the end of summer, I had orders to go. Again, that's God, right? It wasn't Sergeant Major Shelley, though he was a pretty awesome man. So Matt had gone and picked up Fox and had gone and secured a house for us down at Fort Gordon, and I was just waiting it out at Fort Lewis. I had a date with Gil Grissom, and if anybody knows that show, anybody, all right? All I did was get up, go to work, come back for lunch, eat my ramen noodles, watch my show, go back to work, come back, go grab something to eat, watch my show, go to bed. That was my life for a couple months. So Fort Gordon was a great place to be, and I really, really, really mean that. Generally, in the military, they say the best place the best place you ever are is either the place you're going to or the place you just left behind, because you're never happy where you're at. But Fort Gordon was really a great place for us to be. It was a much slower pace than what we were used to. Fox started school in Virginia while we were gone, and he continued with first and second grade while we were in Georgia. Zen and Levy were born in Augusta, Georgia, and things were really good. Fox had joined the Cub Scouts, and it was there I met some of the best people. And this was probably our first friend groups that weren't military, so it was just a different kind of people. Fox and that Cub Scout group was probably the tightest 9 little kids running around. I don't even remember if it was like his 7th birthday or something. I had 9 kids laid across the living room floor because they were all staying over because it was Fox's birthday. So it was really good. So we met these people. We started going to church there regularly with a couple that we met in Cub Scouts. I was still a non-believer, and I let them know I don't believe, but I'll go to church and listen to what you have to say. That was my mindset. The whole time I went, I felt like a fraud. I didn't believe. I didn't want to believe, honestly. And my very good friend was the only one who knew that, Diana Hall, and her husband, of course. She's probably prayed for me more than I care to even admit or think about. She's prayed with me so many times. I remember praying with her in the car as the rain was pouring down around us, and we were praying the sinner's prayer, and she was trying her best to lead me to Jesus. And I was trying my best to open my heart to that, but had no clue what that looked like, you know. I was asking Jesus desperately to come into my heart, but I was going like this, I think, honestly. Just, you can come, but just this far, you know. But I really felt nothing, just being honest. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I was just kind of still empty. So I sang in the choir there. They have a really cool thing at Christmas time called the Singing Christmas Tree, I think kind of what Liberty does. We rocked that. I did that twice. I did that very pregnant, hoping that I could just make it until the break so I could go pee, you know. But I did all of that. I went to Sunday school. I coached upwards basketball. Best time ever. I was 7 months pregnant doing that too. And I think y'all were third graders, weren't you? I think it was third graders. They were second graders? I thought it was third graders. They were always like, Miss Jackson, when you gonna have that baby? Because I had like a basketball sitting on top of my stomach. And I was like, do suicides, run, you know? I attended church every Sunday. I did everything that you could do in a church. But still, I was just a non-believer. But I just couldn't make the small step. Dinah was a great friend. She talked to me. Every conversation we had included Jesus. Every conversation that woman has with anyone includes Jesus. She answered all the questions that I had. I know she prayed for me, and seeds were being planted. I just didn't realize that. From Georgia, we went to Hawaii for a year. While we were in Hawaii, Matt deployed to Iraq, and I came back home to Virginia. And by that time, I was a stay-at-home mom. While we were at Fort Gordon, when I got pregnant with Levy, I had to make the easiest decision I've ever made that broke my heart at the same time. And I had to choose whether to be a good soldier or a good mom. And as much as I wanted to be a good soldier because I would eat, live, and breathe that, I chose to be a good mom. Or at least I hope that I was somewhat decent at it. So I got out the military while we were at Fort Gordon and decided to kind of stay at home with the kids and see what that felt like. Being a stay-at-home mom was both extremely rewarding and the most difficult job I've ever had. And I'm really thankful for that time. I think I had about 3 or 4 years that I got to stay with them and be at home with them and got to experience all that is. I can probably sing you every stinking Nickelodeon kids song there was from that time period, but it was a good time. So after Matt, remember we went to Hawaii, I came back to Virginia to be at home because Hawaii, as beautiful as it was, cost way too much money, and I felt very isolated and struggled a little bit there being a civilian as opposed to a soldier. I could not fit into that crowd. I didn't understand what that looked like. The few times we went to any gatherings with either his unit or the MP balls or whatever, I just wanted to hang out with the dudes and talk soldier stuff, but I wasn't part of that group and they didn't know me, and I didn't fit in with the wives, so it was really isolating. So when he left, I was like, you know what, I'm coming home. So we flew back home. We packed up probably a 18-inch by 18-inch box, and I said, whatever fits in there is all we got, other than our suitcase. So, like, pick a few toys and let's roll. I flew back from Hawaii with 3 kids on a red-eye flight. I do not recommend that. They don't sleep like you think they're going to. I don't care how much Benadryl you give them. No, I'm joking. I didn't give them Benadryl. No. So Matt came back so we came home, and it was a good time. I enjoyed, my mom helped me out. I was able to finish my associate's degree online that I had started when I was in the military and whatnot. And then Matt got to come home, and as soon as he was back in Hawaii, his time was pretty much up, so I stayed in Virginia, and he got orders to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is otherwise known as Fort Lost in the Woods. That was our last duty station, and Matt retired from there, and we moved back permanently what has been permanent so far, to Virginia. We were really fortunate to have learned of a small company starting up in Farmville that was being headed up by a former MP, and he had put the word out to all of his MP first sergeant friends. So Matt found out about that, and we made a few phone calls and sent some emails and came back for an interview, and we got offered a job. And I'll tell you, that was God in a really big way. Not only was it hard to find a job, mostly Matt was overqualified, and that was a really difficult time. Everything that we were applying to was just denied. And so we got really fortunate with that. So back home we came. Not too long after we got back to Virginia, and I'm hopefully going to be closing up here soon. I'm not trying to drag this out. We were only living about 30 minutes from where I grew up, and my mom found out that she had cancer. I can't imagine having to go through that time not being here. My mom was my best friend. I called my mom, if not every day, every other day. And I still did. Even when we moved back and I'm 30 minutes away from her, I called her almost every day going home from work. Hey, how's it going? How's your day doing? We talked all the time. My phone bill from Korea and every place was really big. But I called her. Even in Iraq, I would call back because Fox was there once a week. And if that boy wanted to talk for an hour, we talked for an hour. That cost a fortune, but we would talk for an hour. By the way, he wanted to be a preacher and a farmer and a police officer and I think a firefighter. And we were all going to live on the same piece of land together so that we would always be together. And yeah, I listen to that story often. But my mom found out she had cancer. And even though it was a shock, you think medicine, right? Everything's all right. We've got this. You do the fight song and everything and wear the T-shirts. That's what I thought anyway. Mom made it 3 years. Her cancer was extremely aggressive. She went into remission once, and we thought it was done. And I think we were in Philadelphia when she got that remissions notice, and we celebrated. And we were on a work trip, and we were like, cheers to my mom, it's great. And we came back home, and by Christmas time, I remember because I was out hunting, and she called me, and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, we're getting gas right now. We're getting ready to go out and hunt. And she's like, come to your grandma's right now. And it was just like a drop in your stomach because you knew it wasn't good. And when we got there, she got out the car and she was just crying. And she goes, the cancer is back and I have a brain tumor. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's not the fight song cheers anymore. It was pretty serious. So, she went through radiation. She went through all kinds of chemo. And I watched the chemo break her down slowly over time. But I will tell you one thing about my mom. She was always saying, when people ask, how are you doing or whatever, she goes, the Lord's not done with me yet. There's still a reason I'm here. I still don't know what that reason is, but I'm at a place now where my faith knows that was an absolute given, that something was accomplished with her still being here and fighting that fight. Not only did we lose my mom to cancer, but we lost my grandma to it as well. My grandma's was very, very quick. She started feeling bad in December, was diagnosed soon after that, and by February she was gone. And that's probably because she was a tough old woman who wouldn't tell you how sick she really was until it was at the end. I aspire to be like that. So anyway. All right, so while all this is going on, I was starting to come around to Jesus, I started to, I don't even know at what point in all of this. I remember my mom still had cancer, and I started to attend APC, and I remember talking to Pastor Jeff many, many times, and he answered all of my questions, and I'd go, I got to think about that, So I started coming around. We started attending church. I still felt like a fraud coming in, but I was kind of more open and receptive to what was being said. My mom was still there. My mom knew I wasn't a believer. She was one of the few people that I did share that with. And she would answer my questions and talk openly with me about that and everything. So she was trying to help guide me, but she never judged me, So all of this being said, there was no significant aha moment that I can remember, like, oh, yes, today I'm a believer. It was a slow thing, and I remember talking to Fox, one time, and it's just like, you feel like you take one step forward and then 2 steps back again, and you might take 3 steps forward and then, nope, a step back. And so it was like this very slow progression for me in learning how to hear and see and understand. I think I remember asking Pastor Jeff, how do you know if the voice in your head is from the Lord? How do you know it's not the enemy whispering something to you or just your own brain? And he's like, it has to line up with Scripture. If it's anything contrary to, that is not the Lord. And I needed to hear that at that moment too. So no aha moment for me. I just started believing. I started paying attention. I started praying. I started hearing. I started seeing. I started going, oh yeah, that one time, that was God, wasn't it? All of those times that he pulled me out from the fire, from the ringer, from that really bad decision I was making, that was God. So I started paying attention, and I came to love the Lord and what he was doing with me and through me. I started to see his hand working in my family's life. I started making much better decisions. The more I searched and asked, the more he answered me. And my heart and mind were willing, and Jesus was there the entire time, patiently waiting for me to go, okay, but, and then he would just answer me, whether it be through Scripture, whether it be through the next message, whether it be through someone texting me something, whether it be through something that my kids said. He always answered me, and I was finally able to pick up on it. I'm going to share with you one more little significant little tidbit down here. I started to study, the Bible, the prophetic, went to the classes. They had you do all these little things so you could hear the Lord better, which I very much appreciated. I started having dreams, not regularly, but there was one significant dream, and it was crazy. So I woke up from this dream, and I was so excited, yes, oh my God. I was just and it was dead in the middle of the night, and I was like, yes, I've got to write this down before I forget it. And I'm jumping out of bed, and I'm over here scrambling with my notebook, and got a pen, and I'm thinking, I've got to be quiet, because no one can speak to me in this moment. I have to be quiet because I don't want to wake up anybody. And I wrote down, I think it was 3 words, and Matt woke up and said, what are you doing? And it all went poof. And I honestly wanted to cry. I was just and I might have gotten a little upset. And I was and I'm sitting there, and I'm okay, Lord, bring it back. You shared it once, do it again, And it's gone. I have fire to lips. And I'm what the heck does that mean, right? Or it took, I think it was 2 years later, 2.5 years later. And I always went back and looked at that in my notebook. It was just, you can imagine what my handwriting looked like. And I always went back and I was what was that? Because it was so significant in the moment, And it was probably 2 years later. I'm sad to say, I was scrolling through Facebook. And there was a verse, and it was Isaiah 6. Y'all know which one it is? What is it? I'm trying to find it here. Then one of the seraphims flew to me, having his hand burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth and said, behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. Now, the verse that was actually on there that got me to this piece was, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, here I am, send me. And that's my verse. but the cold to the lips. As soon as I saw this verse, I immediately started bawling my eyes out, and I pulled out my phone probably to go to that, and he showed me what that dream was, and that he was purifying me for what was to come, and that my guilt was gone, and that what was forgiven, and that's my verse. Here I am, Lord, send me. All right, so so what does all this mean? I have no idea. That was my story. I feel like there should be like a Taylor Swift song or something. I mean, seriously, it's like, I can't think of one to start singing for you. I would definitely clear the room really quickly if I did. I don't know if it's encouraged you guys at all, if it will encourage someone here, if it might encourage someone on the great big YouTube page back there. We had technical difficulties, right, Sam? All right. So really, it's really about no matter how far in the walk you are, what place you are. You know, I just want to encourage people to continue to seek, to continue to listen, and don't be discouraged with that. It took me so many years to get to the place of not the aha, you know, and then many years after the not the aha to get to, okay, I can kind of roll with this, to the place where I trust you fully, Lord, to do whatever you want in my life and take anything that you need from me. How can I serve you? Here I am, send me, you know. So my heart, here's the crazy thing, you know. I am not an evangelist. I don't like people. People exhaust me. I am an extroverted introvert. An introverted extrovert? No, an extroverted introvert. Like, people exhaust me. But I have such a deep love for people. And it's kind of hard to figure out, how do you work with that? Because I don't want to interact with them at all. And so I came across something, and it kind of stuck out to me. So I wrote it down here, is I want to be a recruiter. I don't know. I want to recruit people for Jesus, you know. I don't want to talk to them much. What's that? Well, just sign the dotted line. Sign here. All the good things are coming, right? But yeah, I want to be a recruiter. So that's really all I've got for you tonight. I ran a little bit long, I think. I'm surprised it lasted that long. I talked really slow on purpose. All right. So I do love you all. Just don't want to talk to you for long. All right. So I'm gonna pray really quick, and then we'll be done. Yeah, hallelujah is right. I'm sweating bullets up here in the sweatshirt. Those lights are really hot. Whew. All right. So, Lord, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for all of those times that you were chasing and I didn't see, for all of those times that you interceded on my behalf and I didn't thank you or see you or know you or anything. Lord, I just ask you to continue to do so. Lord, I ask that you keep interceding on my behalf. I ask that you keep talking to me and walking with me and sitting with me and scratching your head, wondering what I'm doing this time, and being okay with that. Lord, I ask you to do the same for everyone in this room, for everyone who may or may not listen to this message. Just intercede on their behalf. Lord, we know that you do. We know that you do. We know that your heart is for us always, and that you never waver. Lord, I ask you to bless everyone in this room. Safe travels going home. If you hadn't had dinner yet, good dinner tonight. And Lord, we just say yes and amen.